Hey guys, I'm back. Today we're going to talk about the Roman Republic. First off, in order to understand Rome, you've got to realize the geography. Rome was located on the peninsula of Italy, which is right next to the Mediterranean Sea, and this sea provided much transportation for food, goods. Italy provided fertile plains and river valleys, which also allowed them to have, as we know, if you have lots of food, then you have extra time to work on other things. Talk about their religious ideals. So the Romans were polytheistic, believing in many gods and spirits. Knowledge of the Greek gods filtered into the Roman culture. This is known as cultural diffusion. The Greek god Zeus became the almighty Roman god Jupiter, and the Greek goddess Hera became the Roman goddess Juno. Let's talk about the Republic for a little bit. Rome was founded around 509 BCE. The Romans founded a new type of government called a republic. And a republic is where you have officials chosen. In our country, we run on a republic as well. Remember, a democracy is where you have each person voting on each thing. Republic is where you have representatives. The highest form of government in Rome was known as the Senate. Senators were wealthy landowners called patricians. So I want you to write that in your notes, patricians. Now, the senators elected 2 consuls, whose job it was to run the government and command the army. So each senator elected 2 people, and those continued on. Let's talk about the Roman family ties. So Roman families were headed by the eldest male. The Romans emphasized discipline, strength, and loyalty. The women had many rights and duties in Roman society as well. Women, however, they didn't have certain rights, like the right to vote. So they did have lesser rights than the men. Officially, the Roman women were expected to remain kind of in the background, not seen out in public. Now, society we have divided into multiple classes. First, the upper class. The Romans were known as patricians. These people held all the important offices. Anything that had anything to do with something in Rome was held by a patrician. Then underneath that, you had common farmers, artisans, and merchants. They were known as plebeians. And then, out of these 2 classes, they were based on birth. The line between the 2 classes was extremely rigid. You could not move from one to the other. Let's talk about the army, because that's what we think of Rome when we think of soldiers when we hear the Roman army. Both patricians and plebeians led double lives as farmers and soldiers because of the constant threat of war. So you may be a farmer, but you also need to know how to fight. All male citizens were required to serve in the army, and no one could hold public office until he served at least 10 years as a soldier. I want you to think about that going into your project that you're doing. How could you make mandatory service in the military something prior to becoming, let's say, the President of the United States? If you've never served in the army, how are you supposed to lead the army as commander-in-chief? Now, let's talk some more about the soldiers themselves. They had massive military units known as legions, which consisted of infantry, which was 5,000 to 6,000 heavily armed foot soldiers, cavalry, small groups of horseback assisted by the infantry, and then each legion was divided into 60 small groups called centuries. You're welcome to look over the picture itself, different weapons. You can search Roman soldiers and find 1,000 different pictures and images of the gear that they wore. A lot of times it was lightweight gear that allowed them to move quickly, protect the necessary parts of the human body, and allow them to fight together in groups. Carthage. We're going to talk about this fight. By 270 BC, Rome had conquered all of Italy. They went on to control northern Africa, Carthage, Greece, and parts of Asia Minor. But the expansion also led to much corruption. So I want you to look right here where we have much of Italy. You have the Italian Alps and all of the land around it. So this right here, look at the purple parts and the red parts. So Rome dominated these parts around Italy, Sicily, and then Carthage we're going to look at around the bottom side of the Mediterranean all the way to Spain, current day Spain. All right, Julius Caesar. Caesar came to power in 48 BCE, and under Julius Caesar, Rome conquered many lands all around. Caesar also reformed the government. He founded libraries and planned different public work projects to help the citizens. Now, as with everyone that does great, wonderful things, they don't always end well. So Caesar was murdered in 44 BCE by a group of Roman aristocrats who feared his power and did not want a dictator. So in the fear that Caesar, as powerful as he was, would continue, maybe even rule over their power, they murdered him. Then we have Augustus. After Julius Caesar died, his grandnephew Octavian, or Augustus, took over. Augustus ruled with absolute power, and this began the Roman Empire period during which Rome was ruled by a series of emperors. You can look up Octavian and we'll learn all about him. The Pax Romana. Under Augustus, Rome enjoyed a peaceful period that lasted about 200 years. This was referred to as the Pax Romana. The government maintained order, enforced laws, defended the borders, and even helped the poor. Many public work projects were conducted, such as aqueducts, canals, and roads, so they improved life, improved plumbing, improved water. Another thing you need to know about the Roman roads is they were amazing. The paved roads were built so well that many of them still exist today. People still walk on them today. The Roman aqueducts were incredible works of engineering and architecture. They managed to move water across miles and miles so the towns would be able to get fresh water, and they would use the water as power. So they could carry up to 30 million gallons of water to the cities every day. There's a couple pictures of the aqueducts themselves that still stand today. All right, aqueduct system. This will give you a little example of what's going on. The difference between Roman aqueducts and modern aqueducts, what they would do is they would create a straight line from the water systems all the way to the cities. Nowadays, we go under the ground with it and use gravitational pull to push, or pressure to use to push the water along. But imagine the time period that they did this. Architecture. The Roman architecture borrowed Greek elements, but made them more grand and heavy. The Roman architecture designed arches, domes, and great amazing structures that held a ton of weight. The structures that they created were amazing. And the Romans took the columns, the idea of columns, everything they had. You'll find columns throughout all of Rome, which is interesting because in the United States, when they built up Washington, D.C., and built up these structures for our country, they used the same idea in architecture. The Colosseum, we could talk for a very long time on the Colosseum, what it was used for. I think you all understand the Colosseum, but we're just going to talk about the fact that there were gladiators, people were sacrificed there. The main point is it was entertainment. And through this entertainment, you can see in this picture here, where the people are standing was ground level. They would have the whole underside where were people, animals, gladiators ready to fight, and they would bring them up through trap doors in the ground, and they would fight on this Colosseum for everyone to see. Here's a side picture of what it looks like, the different tiers, the different places to sit, and of course a few gladiators fighting it out. There are some questions. We don't know exactly whether it was up or down. But at one point, if the gladiator overpowered another one, he would look up to the emperor, and they would either hold their thumbs up or thumbs down, and one meant to kill him, and one meant to kill him. But there's, sorry, to kill him, and the other meant to let him live. Yes, I know, we'll see you're laughing, yes. Basically, we don't know if thumbs up meant, yes, go ahead and kill him, or yes, let him live. But either way, one of the symbols of the thumb up and thumb down was used all the way back into the Roman times. Right here it gives you a picture of the Roman Empire and how far it stretched. You can see that at the time, it stretched to what they consider the known world. Let's talk about the contributions. What did Rome do for us? The Roman poets, historians, and philosophers like Virgil and Tacitus wrote works in Latin that often survive to today. Some of their works we still have translations. Latin is a root of several modern languages, and we also have Roman numerals that can be seen in many places, the number system that they use. Legal contributions. The most valuable contribution of the Romans to the world was the 12 tables of written laws. This right here, the Roman legal system provided security for the empire, equality under the laws, the right to defense, and to be considered innocent until proven guilty. These 12 tables are what you need to add into your project to understand how the Romans were able to govern their people. The Roman legal system inspired legal principles still practiced around the world today. But why did it fall? Rome wasn't built in a day, and it took much longer for it to decline. Eventually, the emperor Diocletian. Oh shoot, I have to put that one. Rome wasn't built in a day, and eventually it took a long time to decline. Eventually, the emperor Diocletian divided the empire into Eastern and Western empires. While the Western Empire fell into chaos and was invaded, the Eastern Empire survived as a center of trade and culture and became what was known as the Byzantine Empire. And we'll talk about the Byzantine Empire as we continue. Right here you can see the different splits. At one point Rome did split into the Western and Eastern Empire, and you can see exactly where the lines go for it. Decline and fall. Invasion of Visigoths and Germanic tribes. Government corruption. People stopped supporting the government. Population declined. Heavy taxes. The middle class began to shrink down. There weren't enough farmers. No one wanted to be a farmer if you had no rights in society. All of these are issues that led to further decline of the Roman Empire itself.